Hey, Valentine's Day is coming up. It's right around the corner. Cozy Earth, you can currently get 41% off just by using our code at checkout. That offer disappears February 28th.
So take advantage of our 41% discount while it lasts, because after that, 21% isn't as good.
No, it's not as good, is it? You can find the Cozy Earth link in the show notes. Make sure you take advantage of our code before February 28th to get 41% off. InfoGo. Find the link in the show notes. Welcome to the podcast. I'm William,
And I'm Kat,
and that makes this Info on the Go.
feeding your curiosity with every show.
I love it. This is going to be the Teapot Dome scandal. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
All right, I'm going to try to set this one up. So let's picture this. Let's go back to 1931. A middle-aged man with thinning hair and a stiff grit steps through the gates of a federal prison. There are no cameras, no cheering crowd, no farewell speeches, just iron bars, stone walls, and a guard holding a ledger. This man was Albert B. Fall, Secretary of the Interior of the United States. He was a cabinet member, a former U.S. Senator, and a trusted advisor to President Warren G. Harding.
He is here simply because a jury found that while serving the American people, he secretly sold off the nation's oil reserves, not to protect the country, but to enrich himself. Now, this had never happened before. So, for the first time in U.S. history, a cabinet secretary was being punished. Not disgraced, not quietly removed, not shielded by political favors, but sent to prison for crimes committed while in office. No resignation erased it. No connection saved him. No power outran the law. And all of it began with oil. Oil hidden beneath Wyoming rock. Oil quietly leased behind closed doors. Oil exchanged for suitcases of cash, loans that weren't loans, and favors that came at a national cost. What followed was secret contracts signed in silence, a Senate investigation that refused to stop, a president who would not live to see the damage revealed, and a scandal so explosive it permanently changed how Americans viewed power. Now, this is the Teapot Dome scandal, a story of greed, secrecy, and the moment the highest levels of government learned that accountability could reach even them.
Yeah, so America after World War One was a nation fueled by oil. So when the war ended in 1918, the United States emerged changed. It was stronger, richer, and more powerful than it had ever been before. Europe was exhausted. Empires had collapsed. But America, well, it stepped onto the world stage not just as a participant, but as a global power. At home, the mood was clear. No more crusades. There was no more chaos, just stability. And President Warren G. Harding would soon give that feeling a name, return to normal. But beneath that calm surface, a quieter revolution was underway.
In the early 1920s, oil wasn't just another resource, it was the future. Automobiles were no longer novelties. Henry Ford's assembly line had turned cars into everyday machines, and American roads were filling with Model Ts. Gas stations replaced hitching posts, cities spread outward, and the nation began to move faster than ever before. But the most important transformation was happening far from Main Street.
Yeah, during the war, the U.S. Navy learned a hard lesson. Coal-powered ships were slow. They required massive crews. They had to stop frequently to refuel. But oil, it changed everything. Oil-powered ships, well, they were faster, more efficient, able to travel faster without stopping. And so by the early 1920s, the U.S. Navy had begun converting its fleet from coal to oil, quietly tying America's military future to a steady supply of petroleum. And suddenly, oil wasn't just an economic resource, it was a weapon.
As all things have turned
Yeah.
into weapons. In any case, fearing future wars or supply shortages, federal officials made a critical decision. Certain oil fields would be locked away, untouched by private industry. They were not for profit. They were not for politics. They were insurance. Among them was Teapot Dome, Wyoming, Elk Hills, California, and Buena Vista Hills, California. And these reserves were placed under federal protection and set aside for national emergencies only to ensure the Navy could never be left vulnerable. They were, in effect, America's oil lifeboats.
So the promise and the temptation. On paper, the idea was simple: protect the reserves, preserve national security, keep politics out of it. But the oil fields, they represented something else too: enormous wealth, unimaginable power, and temptation for anyone who controlled access to them. Because whoever controlled America's oil, well, it controlled America's future. And soon that control would rest in the hands of one man, a man who believed those reserves were being wasted.
In November of 1920, Americans were tired. Tired of war, tired of reform, tired of being told that the government needed to fix everything. And into that exhaustion stepped Warren G. Harding, a newspaper publisher from Ohio. He was a solid speaker, a man who looked, sounded, and even felt like stability. Harding promised Americans something simple and soothing, a return to normalcy, if you will. There were no crusades, there was no upheaval, just peace, prosperity, and a government that stayed out of the way. The country embraced him, and Harding won the presidency in a landslide.
You know, Harding was not just a micromanager, though. He believed good people should be given freedom to do their jobs. He disliked confrontation, and he placed enormous value on personal loyalty. Friends, in Harding's mind, were people you could trust. That belief would become his greatest weakness.
Yes, that sounds so sad. I'm like, yay, like a solid politician, but I don't think that's going to work out too well.
No.
Anyway, when Harding arrived in Washington, he brought his inner circle with him and a loose collection of political allies and longtime friends known as the Ohio Gang. They met socially, they drank together, they played poker late into the night, and crucially, they were placed into positions of extraordinary power. Among them, cabinet secretaries, agency heads, advisors with control over money, land, and law enforcement. Many were unqualified, and some were deeply corrupt. Surprise.
Mm.
Most operated with minimal supervision as well.
I wonder how that's going to work out. We're doing a podcast about it, so probably not too good.
My prediction is not too well.
Yeah, for real. So this was a government defined by trust, but not by accountability. You know, massive federal reserves flowed through offices with little scrutiny. Decisions were made informally. Paper trails were, well, they were non-existent. And Harding believed loyalty, well, it ensured honesty. But loyalty without oversight, well, that can become something else entirely. It can become protection.
Well, sounds like this was a perfect storm for corruption. The ideal, even. There was enormous economic growth, rapid industrial expansion, vast public resources, weak enforcement, personal friendships overriding ethics. Washington appeared calm. The economy boomed. The president smiled. But beneath that surface, the machinery of government was being quietly exploited.
Among Harding's appointees was one man who understood exactly how much power he had and how little anyone was watching. He controlled millions of acres of federal land. He oversaw the nation's mineral wealth, and he believed government resources were meant to be used, not locked away. And his name was Albert Bacon Fall, and he was about to turn trust into an opportunity.
So, who was Albert B. Fall? Well, Albert Bacon Fall did not come from Washington society. He was a product of the American frontier, hard, unforgiving, and suspicious of authority. Born in Kentucky in 1861, Fall drifted west as a young man, eventually settling in New Mexico, where survival demanded toughness and compromise was often seen as weakness. He carried that worldview with him for the rest of his life.
He was a man known for his gruff voice, blunt opinions, and fierce independence. He had little patience for bureaucracy, even less for, well, regulations. You know, Government rules weren't safeguards, they were obstacles. And he believed the federal government held too much land, too many resources, and, it had just too tight of a grip on all of it. And he believed men like himself, experienced, practical, decisive, well, they should be the ones deciding how those resources were used.
Fall became a U.S. Senator from New Mexico in 1912, just weeks after the territory achieved statehood. In the Senate, he built a reputation as pro business, deeply skeptical of conservation, and a relentless critic of federal land protection. He clashed openly with reformers and conservationists who wanted to preserve public lands for future generations. Fall saw that idea as wasteful. Land, in his view, existed to be developed.
Yeah, and in 1921, President Harding rewarded loyalty and friendship by appointing Fall as Secretary of the Interior. It was one of the most powerful positions in the federal government. The Interior Department controlled millions of acres of public land, mining rights, water access, and crucially, oil. Black gold, you say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and through administrative maneuvering, well, Fall gained control over the naval oil reserves, including Teapot Dome, removing them from Navy oversight and placing them firmly under his authority. It was a move few noticed at the time, but eventually it's going to change everything.
Publicly, Fall spoke the language of patriotism and efficiency. And privately, he was trouble. He lived beyond his means. He was deeply in debt. His ranch in New Mexico was struggling financially. And despite his powerful position, Fall was nearly broke. And that contradiction really mattered. Because when vast public wealth meets private desperation, the result is rarely honorable.
Yeah. And Fall didn't see himself as corrupt. He believed he was practical. He believed government resources should be used, not locked away for hypothetical emergencies. And more importantly, he believed he should decide who used them. In his mind, efficiency justified secrecy, authority justified discretion, and discretion, well, it justified silence.
In the wide open plains of central Wyoming, there is a stretch of land so isolated it barely registered on most maps in the 20th century. No towns nearby, no rail lines, no crowds, just rolling prairie and a low, rocky hill rising from the earth. Well, that hill, weathered by wind and time, had an odd shape. From the right angle, it looked like a teapot, with a spout and handle carved by erosion.
How
So,
how how neat would that be?
I think that's adorable.
You're just riding down the road and you're like, "Oh wow, look at that. That's a teapot in a mountain."
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry.
No, you're fine. I think it would be awesome to see. So, to anyone passing through, though, it seemed quiet, empty, and unremarkable. But appearances were deceiving.
Yeah, because under that Wyoming soil sat one of the largest untapped oil reserves in the United States. Federal geologists knew it. Military planners, they knew it as well. And crucially, the oil industry knew it. Teapot Dome wasn't preserved for beauty or conservation. It was preserved for war. It was preserved because of the oil underneath it.
Right. So, after World War I, the U.S. Navy had a permanent shift from coal to oil powered ships. And oil meant greater speed, longer range, and fewer refueling stops. But it also meant vulnerability. If private oil supplies were disrupted during a future war, the Navy needed guaranteed access to fuel. Teapot Dome was part of that guarantee. It was set aside as an emergency reserve, locked away until the nation needed it most. And for years, that system worked because the Navy controlled it.
Yeah. But when Albert B. Fall became Secretary of the Interior, well, he saw Teapot Dome differently. To him, the oil wasn't security, it was waste. So he made a move few noticed at the time, but one that would prove fatal to the system. Through administrative maneuvering, Fall transferred control of the naval oil reserves from the Navy Department to the Department of Interior. There was no public debate, no congressional uproar. There weren't even any kind of newspaper headlines. He just kind of secretly shifted authority. And with that single move, military oversight disappeared. Safeguards, well, they were weakened. And decisions once tied to national defense became administrative choices. And those choices now belong to Albert B. Fall.
Mm.
See where this is going?
Ugh, this doesn't look good.
No.
Once the reserves were under Interior's control, the rules changed. There was no longer a military chain of command, so no naval officers asking hard questions, no emergency only restrictions with teeth. What remained was discretion, and discretion, when paired with secrecy, creates opportunity. Behind closed doors, conversations began. Quiet meetings took place, oil executives made their case, and contracts were drafted far from public view.
Yeah, and I think before we get into the secret leases and bribes there, I say let's take a small break. What do you think?
Yes.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
William, I know how you love matcha tea with coconut milk.
Yeah, it's clean energy without a crash.
Then you'll love Mantra Matcha. They offer super premium ceremonial matcha and 6 superfood infused flavors made from the finest, youngest tea leaves for a naturally sweet, ultra smooth taste.
With each flavor, it's infused with powerful superfoods like cacao, ginger, and goji berries. And they also have those classic favorites like banana cacao, strawberry lemon, cinnamon goji berry, plus superfood berry, ginger beet, and rosehip dragon fruit. It's organic, non GMO, gluten free with 0 grams of sugar. You can enjoy it like me, or maybe hot or in a smoothie like Cat. Every purchase helps provide meals to kids through No Kid Hungry.
It's at mantramatcha.com. Get 15% off using our code INFOGO at checkout. Both links are in the show notes.
Hey, everybody, we want to tell you about strong coffee. Every morning it starts with a choice. You can settle for just coffee, or you can rise up with strong coffee. And it's the world's strongest cup of joe. Strong isn't just a drink, it's a movement. It stands for striving to reach our natural greatness.
It's born from one simple need: to be better. They rebuilt coffee from the ground up, infusing organic coffee with collagen, protein, nootropics, and functional ingredients that fuel your body and sharpen your mind. No crash, no compromises, just clean energy, focus, and flavor that fires you up.
Yeah, so whether you're chasing kids, chasing goals, or chasing greatness, don't just do it with coffee, do it with strong coffee. And our listeners can save 20% off just by using our code INFOGO at checkout. Hey, if you're looking for your favorite band or sports team or TV show, check out Old Glory. They've been in operation since 1969 and they have over 300,000 items. They have from the Beatles all the way to Metallica, NFL, NBA. It really doesn't matter what you're looking for. They have tees, hoodies, hats, gifts, everything a true fan could ever want. And it's family owned and operated. They have fast shipping, free standard delivery on every order. And you know what? Our listeners get a 15% off at checkout using our code INFOGO. You can find the link in the show notes. So now that we're back, the men who came calling on Albert B. Fall were not strangers to power. They were titans of the American oil industry, wealthy, connected, and accustomed to, well, getting whatever they wanted. Two names mattered the most. Harry Sinclair, head of Sinclair Oil, which was aggressive, secretive, and fiercely protective of his business empire. Then you had Edward L. Dauphiny. Dauphiny or Dauphiny?
Mm,
I would say Doheny.
Doheny.
Yeah,
I was gonna
okay.
say there's no P or GH, so
Well, he was founder of Pan American Petroleum, a self-made millionaire whose oil fields stretched from California to Mexico and whose wealth reached deep into Washington. They knew what lay beneath the Teapot Dome, and they knew exactly who controlled access to it.
oof. Under normal circumstances, leasing federal resources required competitive bidding, open processes, public notice, clear terms. Well, Albert Fall ignored all of that, all of it. Instead, he quietly awarded exclusive leases to Sinclair and Doheny without competition, without transparency, and without informing Congress or the public. No bids were solicited, no alternatives considered, and no explanations offered. The decisions were made privately, signed quietly, and filed away. On paper, they appeared legal. In practice, they were anything but.
Yeah, I can just already see where this is going. So the truth of those leases, well, it wasn't written on any government document. It was paid directly to, well, you guessed it, Albert B. Fall. And over time, he received more than $400,000 in bribes. And we're talking about in 1920s money. So that would be equivalent to several million dollars today.
Right.
And this money came in many forms. It came in cash payments, Liberty bonds, loans with, no repayment schedule. You know, there was really nothing labeled as a bribe, but everything, well, it was designed to look personal.
Some of the money arrived in ways that sounded more like crime fiction than government business. Cash delivered by hand. Suitcases carried into offices and homes. No receipts, no witnesses. There were no contracts mentioning kickbacks, no written promises, just quiet understanding between powerful men. If questioned, Fall could say the money was private, a loan from a wealthy friend. And for a time, that explanation held.
And this was not careless corruption. It was calculated. Every step was designed to avoid paperwork, really kind of blur those legal boundaries and to exploit the trust of, you know, of everyone. And, it was to hide behind administrative authority. So he believed the system could not touch him. And he believed discretion was protection. And he also believed loyalty from Harding, from his colleagues, and from the oil men who kept the truth buried.
Didn't know this train wreck was going this bad. Oof. Well, for months, the scheme worked. The oil flowed, the money changed hands, no alarm sounded, but secrecy does have shelf life. And eventually, even the most carefully constructed silence begins to crack because someone in Washington finally started asking the wrong questions.
Oh, yeah. So at first, nothing seemed wrong. The leases were approved, the paperwork existed, and Washington moved on. But corruption, well, it rarely announces itself. No, it just kind of whispers.
Inside government circles, a few details began to raise eyebrows. The oil leases were unusual, approved quickly, handled quietly, and granted to the same small circle of powerful oilmen. There had been no competitive bidding, no public debate, no explanation for the urgency, and there was Albert Fall himself, a man who had entered office nearly broke, was suddenly flush with cash. His ranch in New Mexico was renovated, debts disappeared. Hmm. Money appeared where none had existed before. I wish that would happen to me.
Yeah, for real. Me and you both. But not
Indiv-
under these
oh
circumstances.
no, okay. No, I'm not trying to like get that high up in the government and just
But
do
if
some business.
money
But if money could just
appear from
appear,
nowhere,
yeah, appear from nowhere in my account, that would be awesome.
amazing. Yeah.
So individually, each detail could be explained away. Together, though, they formed a pattern.
There was one senator who would not let it go. Thomas J. Walsh of Montana. Walsh was not flashy. He didn't stand. He did something far more dangerous. He just asked some questions, and he kept asking. And in 1922, Walsh began pushing for a Senate investigation into the oil leases. At first, his efforts, well, they were dismissed. Colleagues called it a fishing expedition, and others assumed nothing would ever come of it. But Walsh was methodical. He followed paper trails. He subpoenaed documents, and he waited.
Months passed with little progress. The financial records began to surface bank statements, bond transfers, private correspondence. Mm. And the most damning revelation was a so called loan from oil tycoon Edward Doheny to Albert Fall for 100,000 in cash, delivered personally to Fall's home.
Mm.
No, no repayment schedule, no interest, no formal documentation, just money. Mm. And suddenly, Fall's explanations collapsed.
Yeah, I mean, just think about what you just said. There's no bank statements, no transfers, no, just private correspondence
And it was delivered personally to his residence.
with no rescheduled payment.
Mm-mm.
Once this story reached the newspapers, outrage followed. Editorials exploded. Cartoons mocked Washington corruption. And the public learned that oil meant for national defense had been secretly handed to private interest. And worst, it appeared government officials had been paid for it. So trust was evaporated. Teapot Dome became a household name.
Oof. Ugh. Well, President Warren G. Harding felt the strain acutely at this point. He had trusted his friends, he had avoided confrontation, and now his administration was unraveling. Surprise. Privately, Harding expressed fear that corruption had reached deeper than he knew. He spoke of betrayal. He appeared exhausted. Then, in August of 1923, while traveling in California, Harding died suddenly, likely of a heart attack. He never lived to see the full scope of the scandal exposed.
Yeah, and with Harding gone, the shield disappeared. There would be no quiet resolutions, no private apologies. The investigation continued unstrained. New documents, new testimony, and the truth was coming closer to the surface. With the president gone, the truth really had nowhere else to hide. So the Teapot Dome scandal, well, it didn't end with headlines. It moved into something far more dangerous for those involved, a courtroom.
And we all know how fast courtrooms move
Yeah.
here in the US.
It's a snail's pace.
Yes. Like the sloth on that one movie.
Oh my gosh. You talking about at the DMV?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The Fox and the Rabbit. It's a Disney movie.
Oh, I can't remember the name of the movie. Anyway, we got
The Shakira song that plays in it plays at work all the time. So the investigation into the Teapot Dome stretched on for years. Committees.
committees. You sound like me now. Committees.
I don't even know how that did that. Okay.
Have we switched roles during this recording?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Committees became trials. Hearings turned into indictments, and documents were dissected line by line. Oof. Albert Fall faced multiple court cases, both civil and criminal. The oil leases themselves were challenged, the bribes were examined, every financial transaction was scrutinized, and the process was grinding by design. Because to convict a former cabinet secretary, the government had to prove not just wrongdoing, but intent.
Yeah, and ironically, the men who paid the bribes, well, they fared better than the men who accepted them. Harry Sinclair and Edward Dotheny had armies of lawyers. They stalled, they appealed. They just used their attorneys and the laws to kind of halt it. Sinclair was briefly jailed for contempt of court, not bribery. And Dauphiny, he was tried but acquitted after his defense argued the money he gave Fall was simply a friendly loan. So the system proved, far harsher on the public official than the private financiers.
Dang. Karma,
Yeah.
sounds like to me.
Well, I mean, yeah, but too, I think if they're taking part of this, I do feel like the private sector should have been just held just as much accountable as the,
Oh, I mean, for sure. To make sure that it was paid back, at least some follow-up letters about this loan, something make it look legit.
yeah.
Anyway, the problem maybe the devil's advocate here. So, um, Albert Fall clung to a simple argument. The money he insisted was personal, loans between friends, unrelated to government decisions, and the leases. He argued they were legal, efficient, and beneficial to the nation. He never admitted corruption. Even as evidence mounted, Fall framed himself as a misunderstood administrator, not a criminal.
I
Some,
mean, yeah, I would do the same thing.
I guess it's
But in
better than pleading insanity, I suppose.
yeah, true. But in 1929, the jury reached this decision. Albert B. Fall was convicted of bribery.
Oh, shocker!
It was a historic first. For the first time in American history, a former cabinet secretary had been found guilty of a felony tied directly to the actions taken while in office. The message was unmistakable. Rank didn't erase responsibility, and office, well, it didn't shield criminal behavior either.
Well, that's a plus,
Yeah, true.
I guess. But it's Lord. I guess history just repeats itself over and over again, eh?
Well, I think, yeah, I would say yeah.
In 1931, the sentence was handed down, and 1 year in prison, a $100,000 fine, and enormous penalty for the era. Fall was elderly and in declining health. That did not matter. He was led away as a convicted felon. Dang, only 1 year in prison.
I don't know how I feel about that, but I think if you give authority to some people, they just take advantage of it. But this was not just a punishment, it was a reversal. A man who once controlled millions of acres of land, strategic oil reserves, the nation's natural wealth. Well, he wasn't controlling anything now, just a prison cell. And the system had done something unprecedented at the time. It had reached up and pulled one of its own down.
So before the Teapot Dome, Washington had seen corruption, plenty of it. Surprise. Cabinet members had been accused, investigated, even impeached. But punishment at the highest levels was rare and often avoided.
Still, we can see that today. One of the closest comparisons came decades earlier. William W. Belknap, Secretary of War under President Ulysses S. Grant. Well, he had been accused of taking bribes in exchange for lucrative trading post appointments. When impeachment loomed in 1876, well, Belknap did something critical. He resigned by stepping down just moments before the House voted. Belknap, well, he escaped criminal conviction. So the Senate tried him anyway, but he was acquitted. He never went to prison, and that pattern, well, it held. High-ranking officials fell, but rarely far enough to hit the ground. Just resign before you get before a conviction comes down, right?
Dang, so just Albert B. Fall just couldn't jump off the wagon.
No.
He just went out with the ship. Albert B. Fall did not escape in time. He did not resign before the investigation gained momentum, and he could not explain away the money and the paper trail held. Fall was convicted, sentenced, and imprisoned. He was not censored, not quietly dismissed, and not protected by precedent. He served time for the first
Yes.
time. The system was followed through. Well, that's woo for a win that way.
Yeah, so the Teapot Dome, well, it marked a turning point. If proved that corruption was not merely a political embarrassment, it could be a criminal offense with real consequences. It told future officials something no law alone could guarantee that power might delay justice, but justice, well, it would prevail.
Though Warren G. Harding had not personally profited from the Teapot Dome, his reputation never recovered. Historians would rank him among the worst presidents in American history, not for his policies, but for the corruption that flourished under his watch. His name became inseparable from scandal. Trust in the government plummeted.
Americans, well, they believe then and now that the highest offices demand the highest standards, and the Teapot Dome, well, it shattered that illusion. If a cabinet secretary could secretly sell off national reserves, then no office seemed untouchable. Skepticism, well, it just replaced the faith.
So, out of that collapse came change. Congress tightened oversight of federal leasing, and transparency requirements increased. Committees were given sharper teeth. The assumption that officials could simply be trusted was replaced with systems designed to verify and challenge their actions. Ethics became more of a talking point, and they became an expectation.
Yeah, but over time, the Teapot Dome, it became more than a place. It became shorthand, a symbol of corruption at the highest levels, a warning, if you will, for political language. Even a century later, the phrase still carries weight because the Teapot Dome, well, it was not just a scandal, it was a reckoning. I learned about this in school, and I always thought it was kind of unique and interesting.
I'm sure I learned about it in school, but I don't remember it at all. The whole thing just, I think the government corruption just never ceases to amaze me with its true debauchery.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have corrupt officials, but you're always going to have those ones that, that don't want to ask the questions, that want to push the envelope, that just won't let it go. There has to be accountability for our our leaders.
Absolutely. All the time. And it's unacceptable to have it otherwise, really, at this point.
Yeah, no, I think the Teapot Dome, it reminds us that even the quietest places can hide the loudest scandals. No office is supposed to be above the law.
Absolutely.
Well, Kat, I mean, that's pretty much all I've got about the Teapot Dome scandal. You know, it's just a part of history, and that's what our podcast is all about, is exploring history and culture, and everything in between.
Yeah. If you'd like to support this podcast, tell a friend and help get the word out.
If you would like to help us keep the show going, you can do so at Patreon. You can find that link in the show notes.
As always, William and I want to thank you for listening.
Whether you've been with us from day one or just tuned in, thank you.
Join the Facebook group at Info on the Go.
Kat has been doing some amazing stuff over there. Check it out.
If you like fun facts and word of the days, that's what I'm doing over there.
Yeah. But whatever you do, wherever you're listening to us at, make sure you hit that follow button.
Yes.
Yeah.
Send us a text using the link in the show notes or leave a review.
And leaving that review really does help others find us. And I promise you, Kat and I both will read it.
Yes.
But if you would like, you can also email us at
infoonthegopodcast@gmail.com.
and you can find that link in the show notes. Till next time.
Stay curious.